Good day, colleagues.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining the breakaway, which will be hosted by myself, Pumelele Ngobo, and Abel Mutsumi. So we'll both be leading this breakaway, which is focusing on financial services as a tool for building resilience in the face of climate change and energy crisis shocks. There's quite a lot that we wanted to share with you. Obviously, these are the hot topics and the current issues that we are facing as the country. But looking at the time, we've broken it into two. Firstly, we'll just focus on issues of climate change. And if we have more time to discuss, then we'll also move into the issue of the energy crisis. Once again, we have 30 minutes for this discussion, and we hope it will be engaging. And we are obviously relying on your expertise, your experience, and the organizations in which you are representing to add into these discussions and help us, craft the way forward. So I think in the way of setting the scene, we have prepared a few slides just to set the scene for our discussion that Abel will be taking us through. And then after that, we will discuss and have some questions at a later stage. Over to you, Abel.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all well. My name is Abel Mutsumi. Thank you for the session. Just to pick up on what was said by Brendan and also part of the presentation is that we, as introduced by Pumelele, Finmark Trust and most of the world, we have taken note of the impacts of climate change. And one, though we don't have a specific module in the 2022 survey, we intend to add it as part of the new survey in 2023 and going forward. So ultimately, we just want to, pick your brains, have a discussion of how we can do that, the process, who's doing what, and all of those things. Going right into it. You would have seen a lot of headlines in South Africa as well, the impact of the floods in different regions of the country. But it's not only floods. We have also seen the lack of water. You remember Western Cape and Cape Town particularly, they had day zero, they had day zero on no water, and some parts of Gauteng, especially Tshwane as well. So climate change is actually becoming a big presence and a reality in South Africa. In the past, we have been shielded. We used to watch the news, watching some other countries like Mozambique, Southeast Asia, that were actually affected a lot by the climate change. So now the conversation and the process has actually reached home. So we are trying to really pay particular attention. Besides that, it's quantifying the cost of climate change in our realities and daily lives, right? You would have seen some of the estimates go as much as 10% of GDP. Some reports have estimated as far as 20% of GDP. That's the recent numbers. However, most of the experts in this space are actually still saying that the number is still underreported or underestimated, right? So we do know, in the KZN example, for example, other than loss of lives, we do know that people do need to cope and be resilient. And in that process, they would turn to financial services, right? So like we have said as well, what is worrying us is that though we have had a question in the past surveys of the number of people that are affected by climate change, floods, storms, and other environmental issues, we have seen that increase from 5% in 2021 to 13% in 2022. And our worry as well is that that number may keep going up as more issues of climate change come, set in South Africa. like I said, they do need to then cope some way, somehow, financially. So there is a question that we have asked: in all the risks that people experience, what do you do? Obviously, majority of people say they do nothing. For example, in that stat on floods and storm and heavy rains, 39% of the adults said of those that experience it said they do nothing, whereas 14% actually tap into their savings, with 11% able to utilize their insurance product. For 15% as well are able to then tap into their credit facilities. So it's those kind of things, and some do non-financial, coping strategies like cutting down on expenses so that they spread the legal they have to cover the basics, while also trying to to manage the effects of the climate change. So we do also know that the three main financial services that are being used are insurance. In the case of KZN as well, when floods damaged houses and cars and all of those. Obviously, our report and FinScope results show that 7% of the adults have a vehicle cover, and only 5% have building insurance. So in that kind of a scenario, it's worrying, especially if 83% of the adults do not have any kind of asset cover. Though in the insurance results, you would see that actually linked to the earlier question on resilience, right? People do have insurance, but more of it is funeral related. It's not geared towards asset or some kind of short-term insurance. So it's those kind of quality of products that the people have, that we're starting to dig deep on, and measuring proper resilience. And on the other side is the saving side. Jabulani did mention that 19% of the adults are saving at the banks. Similarly, part of the worrying part is the 48% that are not saving at all. And linked to the comment on liquidity, when somebody or the household is unfortunate to be in that area hit by floods or any kind of climate-related risks, the question is on liquidity. Are they able to access the money they have saved readily to use that as part of the coping mechanisms? And most of the answers, most of the adults said that they are not really able to access that money, or the money is not readily available. If it is, especially people who have fixed term, insurance products, it comes with a higher penalty because you are now liquidating that investment before maturity. So it's those kind of things that we need to now start interrogating, actually probing a bit more into what kind of financial services are more appropriate. Similarly with credit, right? Not everyone has the proper credit score to access credit, right? Of what also is worrying us is the people who then tend to the informal financial service providers or credit providers, where you are now trapped into a perpetual debt. You are always going to pay that mashonisa forever and ever. So because you are trying to escape, the floods and all of those things. So just by way of introduction, opening up the conversation to hear a lot from you. What are you doing in your respective institutions? How can we then start crafting the climate change module that we want to look into? What are the key data points you are looking at and all of those things? I'd like to open up the conversation. They can all unmute themselves and then we chat. Yeah. This end, sorry, I'm presentation mode. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We've noted your hand. If you can come in. Sorry about that.
Thank you. My name is Riza Omar from Citizen Surveys. We collected the data on FinScope. So we did a really large study just before COVID on the perceptions of climate change among South Africans 16 years and older. So I do have some slides that is going to really assist but not from a financial perspective, but from the perceptions of South Africans. So if you'd like, I can show you about 4 slides, which deals with it in depth. To the best of my knowledge, this is the only piece of research that deals with the perceptions of South Africans as it relates to climate change. Would you like me to show you the work that we have done on the matter?
Reza, if you don't mind, are you not able to just talk through the key insights from there?
Okay, so it's one of the things about climate change is the way people understand climate change. So we asked the question, have you heard of climate change? And only 70% of people said that they heard about climate change. Have you heard of global warming? 73%. And the awareness of the terms climate change or global warming was 78% of people. It gets a lot more interesting when we start asking and we start solidifying in people's minds. It's the effect of climate change. In the last 5 years, have you experienced drought, water shortages because there was little or no rain? And 2/3 of South Africans experienced that. In the last 5 years, have you experienced floods, storms, damage to your home, gardens, and 45% of South Africans said that. When we put it together, and people are thinking in terms of droughts and floods, we have 84% of South Africans believe that the weather is changing. It gets even more interesting. We ask people, are you worried about climate change? And what we see is 85% of South Africans are worried about climate change. And what is the anticipated effects of climate change? 80% agree that it's going to damage farming, crops, and animals. 76% it will harm people in Africa. What is interesting about this is nearly 8 in 10 said climate change will harm future generations. And only 7 in 10, said it's going to harm them personally. But it even gets more interesting. We ask who must address climate change, and nearly 4 in 10 South Africans said it must be government that addresses this. So it's, and about a quarter said environmental organizations or lobby groups. We have a lot more on the matter about how people perceive climate change. And if we use some of these questions, because they have been tried and tested, we can overlay it on top of financial vulnerability and financial inclusion and the ability to deal with shocks. And then we'll get a far more in-depth picture of how climate change is affecting South Africans and how concerned they are. And that's my contribution. Thank you.
That is great. Thank you so much. And I think, you know, with what you've shared, I think it resonates very well with the message that we're trying to also push across, because I think a while back, we've been hashtagging and praying for other countries, like Abel was saying, but now it's hitting closer to home. And I think at this point in time, we cannot dispute the fact that this issue, it's escalating and it needs our intervention. So colleagues, we are opening up the conversation here because I think the important thing is that we are seeing that the most vulnerable and the poor are also affected a lot by this. Most of them are generating their livelihoods through subsistence farming, and in the cases of such climate shocks, they are the first to be impacted, people losing their houses and things like that. And I think the picture that Abel has presented again is a concern, because if you have so many people that are not insured at all, it says that they cannot, or they are not well equipped, you know, to stand against those shocks. If we have people who are not saving at all and they are not borrowing, we saw people are mostly borrowing for food, and not these issues. So there are a lot of issues at hand. We'll just allow and open for a discussion, especially if your organization or you are working closely with some groups that are already working around this issue. Are we already working on issues of suitable products that are affordable for the most vulnerable as well? What is the status in the sector? Lucanio, I note your hand.
Yes, good morning, colleagues. As Pumela has just said, I'm Lucanio from the FSCA. So as you know that our focus is really on the financial sector conduct. So what we are busy with, I see my colleague has written on the chat there about our focus on consumer vulnerability and resilience. So what we want to know essentially is what are the financial services providers doing to assist in the financial resilience of financial customers. So are there products that were offered specifically to improve financial resilience, and at what costs? Because it doesn't help when you are dealing with financially vulnerable individuals to offer them these products that can improve their situation, only to charge them a very high fees to access them. So I don't know if we have the data from the FinScope on that. It'd be very interesting to know that. So my question right now is, do they provide products that assist in building financial resilience?
Okay, thank you, Kanyo, for your question. As Zanele, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Phumelele. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Zanele Gigaba from the South African Insurance Association. I'm just going to give my personal view on the challenges that a service provider or a product provider could face in creating products for the vulnerable. So I think one of the questions, especially relating to non-life insurance, is mostly the vulnerable. If we look at, for instance, in KZN and the floods that happened in 2022, they are situated in areas that are not suitable for residential properties, or and also the other a big challenge that we've seen recently is the issue of the aging infrastructure in South Africa and the lack of maintenance in the infrastructure. How does that affect the creation of suitable products? The industry depends a lot in international reinsurers to sort of like support the creation of products. We cannot create a product and not have reinsurers. So if there is no appetite because the risk is sort of like guaranteed, it then becomes problematic to create those products. So we need to keep that in mind. So in terms of risk resilience and risk management, there's a personal layer where the consumer must manage the risk, but also there's an extended layer that sits outside the consumer, which we're not in control of as a consumer. For instance, you're not in control of a pothole. You're not in control of a collapsing bridge or the flooding that sometimes happen, which is exacerbated by the issue of the infrastructure. And those are the things that we have to look at when we consider whether it's viable to have a product or not. You cannot isolate it to say just create a product and it must be affordable if there's issues that are inhibiting us. The best way to create products, you create products in an environment where risk management has been taken into account by various stakeholders. So I would agree with the perception that a big element of dealing with climate change lies with government first and foremost. They have got to deal with certain things in terms of the infrastructure, and secondly, they must deal with things in terms of putting laws in place that will assist us in dealing with the issue of global warming. And then when you really come to the individual, there's just your space. But if that has not been resolved, your risk, you cannot manage your risk. And that would be my 2 cents views. Thanks, colleagues.
Thank you so much for those insights, Zanele, because it's really important for us to understand, your perspective as well, as well as the consumers. Obviously, we will be biased, especially from our side, coming from FinMark, and we are passionate about making financial markets work for the poor, and we get concerned, when people really do not have anything to fall back on. People have no savings, because there are still so many perceptions around those things as well. Some people don't even think they qualify for those products. Maybe they are set for a certain group of people, not them. There are so many things that we are dealing with in the space already, and I think it's quite refreshing as well to understand from your perspective the things that are important to you. I think Abel, you wanna come in?
Thanks so much for the contributions. So I'll try and comment on what has been said as well. Thanks, Reza, and hi, Reza. So it's a good thing that at least there's some steps and some research that has started, to be done in this space. And much more important for us, as Phumelele said, because we are looking at financial inclusion, the question still remains, how then do we create or justify or show the relationship between climate change and financial inclusion, right? But then leads me to my next question from Lukanyu. What, as he said, FSC is looking at consumer vulnerability and resilience, and whether there is whether there are existing products from FSPs that can provide that resilience. So look at that is the idea, and that is the intention with really trying to really probe this further, right? You would understand two parts. So because the FinScope is a national representative survey, it still doesn't give you all the nuances and all the answers. And that's where Phumelele's team comes in, where we would then follow up with a qualitative research that really can unpack some of this resilience. And like what we have, unlike all the other countries we do work in, South Africans are really smart in utilizing financial products, for lack of a better way, unintentionally. It's called System D, right? Where, they'll find a way to use an insurance product meant for something else, but then it solves the current resilience kind of challenge. So it's a space we really want to zoom in and provide all those answers. So at this point, we do have nuggets of some of that data, but we really want to zoom in, like we said, like our introduction said, it's hitting closer to home now. And the wake-up call is, if it's going to cost as much as 20% of GDP, that's a lot. That's like what? It's a lot. So how then do we create mitigation solutions or interventions that will then start working on those things? Zanele, I like your point, but I have a question and to you and the other audience in terms of your comment, your last comment, that government should actually lead the charge on finding those solutions. Is it best placed, left to government? And what is our experience if we leave, that kind of a thing to government? That's just a question, to everybody else. Should we rather leave this, to government to provide solutions? If at all, what is the best appropriate department in this case? Because environmental services looks at the actual physical matter, right? Then, it's a question. How do we go about actually, creating the solutions?
I'm sorry to come in, colleagues. Sorry. So just a quick 2 minutes. I was hoping there would be someone from the banking sector, particularly here, because there would be some innovative products that I would have expected them to come up with. The same ones that they introduced to us when COVID hit us, that would assist a temporarily vulnerable customer towards issues in terms of climate change and things like that. So yes, I understand Zanele's point. Of course, I don't 100% agree with the government part, but I understand that her main point. I don't know if there is someone from the banking sector who can maybe help us with how innovative they can be in terms of product selection or product provision for financially vulnerable customers due to climate change or other life events?
Sure. I noted there's a hand that quickly popped up when you were raising that if there is a banking sector. So I think I'll allow Zanele because her hand was first, and then we'll go to, is it Andres?
Pumele, you can continue. It's fine. I lost my train of thought.
All right. Andres.
Hi guys.
Hi.
Yeah, so my name is Andres Perez. I'm the co-founder of the FinTech Association of South Africa. We have been following up quite a bit when it comes to what fintechs are tackling the energy, specifically the energy crisis in South Africa with the Eskom, power cuts. One of them is a company who's tokenizing via NFTs, solar power in Cape Town. They running this project with City of Cape Town, and they're piloting in a couple of areas where essentially the people can sell energy back to the grid to City of Cape Town, and these get tokenized on the blockchain. But from the energy side, I saw the other day that FNB launched a product that helps financing solar, and I think I did send the link on the chat. So it's pretty much is renewable energy for businesses only. But then again, the banking system has sort of like limited to people who have a credit history. But what about those that perhaps don't have a credit history? And this is where we spoke with companies such as Lula Lend, where they will they look into creating, let's call it a program to fund these sort of initiatives, because I mean, solar energy is going to become a big thing in South Africa with the power cuts and everything. So from the fintech side, I think we're still very in early stages. It's more the banks who have taken the initiative to offer these sort of loans to businesses. But again, it is discriminating, or it is excluding the previously excluded financial people. So this is one of the projects that the banks have launched.
Actually, while you're on that part on fintechs, so as you know, Finma Trust is an NGO, right? We try and we are an independent organization. So because there is this looming problem, and like you said, the fintechs are still on the early stages, one of our ideals is to try and also find ways to create a safe enough space for fintechs to really be active in the space. So we can then, we are then able to work with the FSCAs, work with the subs to really find space. If we need to sandbox, we can do that, because this is a looming problem that we foresee, that we really do need to start providing answers to Lucanio's questions. So my comment to your earlier point, Lucanio, on the products, right, and also from the banks, I think it links nicely with what Zanele said. We realized as well in the COVID times that most of the products that were there, they had some kind of guarantees. So the risk mitigation, the risk was very low. So then FSPs and everybody else was then able to provide this means. I think that is the main crux and main point that Zanele said, that government should lead this. It's not necessarily on the solutioning side, but much more on the providing of the guarantees, so that whichever fintech, whichever bank comes into the space, at least to an extent, they do have some guarantees that it's not all loss for them. All of those kind of things. And Andres, on your point as well on the FNB, so just to confirm, on the consumer side, the solar funding solution they have as well says, if you're an adult and you can use your mortgage as collateral, then you are then able to take X amount to the value of your mortgage. Then you are then able to use that to finance your solar solution. So